Welcome everybody, my name's Scott Hebbard, I'm the Communications Manager at Sparx Systems, and tonight as part of our Sparx Global webinar series we are looking at Enterprise Architect for Business Analysis. This series has already had one part which is available on our Sparx Systems YouTube site and also available on www.sparxsystems.com, and this gives a broad overview of Enterprise Architect for Business Analysis. The particular topic that we're looking at tonight is business analysis planning, and I am joined by Nithya, and Nithya will be doing the presentation. So just a little bit about Nithya. So she's an experienced IT consultant specializing in solutions for business analysis, business data modeling, business intelligence, and information architecture. She has experience in all phases of IT projects in a variety of different industries with niche skills in Sparx Systems Enterprise Architect. She is a certified business analysis practitioner and a competent business strategist with expertise in aligning business goals to technology solutions to drive process improvements and innovation. So welcome to you, Nithya. So the agenda for tonight, we'll look at how to submit questions. We'll hand over to Nithya to discuss business analysis planning. We'll examine a model in Enterprise Architect, which will show you lots and lots of examples of how business analysis planning can be done within Enterprise Architect, and a Q&A with the audience. So how to ask questions, please note that audio is muted for all participants. You'll be able to type questions to the host, which is me, and if we can't answer all questions live, we'll follow up offline. On the right of screen, you'll see the go to session window. So in the text box down the bottom, you can simply enter your question and hit send, or hit the enter key on the numeric keypad, and that'll come through to me as the host. So I look forward to getting your questions. But right now, I'd like to hand over to Nithya, who is going to present our topic for tonight, which is Enterprise Architect for Business Analysis, and in particular, business analysis planning. So looking forward to hearing from you, Nithya, and hearing your expertise and hearing all about how great EA is for business analysis planning. So welcome, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending where you are in the world. So
thank you, Scott. Thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure to share my experience and my knowledge in enterprise architecture, architect for business analysis. Yes, without further ado, let's begin the presentation. I'd just like to confirm that my audio is clear and you can see my screen, Scott.
I can see your takeaways listed on screen and your audio is coming through loud and clear. So that's great.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Nithya.
Fantastic. So let's proceed. In this webinar, I would like to cover the topics that are listed on the screen. These are the takeaways. So I will talk about the 3 useful skills that has helped me as a business analyst in the planning and also in other phases of business analysis activities. And secondly, we'll touch upon the business analysis core concept model. And then we'll look into the built-in features that EA provides. When I say EA, I'm an enterprise architect that provides for the modeling capabilities to capture the business analysis planning tasks. While we see all the built-in features, I'll also talk about how we organize and maintain the planning artifacts in EA. And finally, I'll provide you with an example model of a BA governance approach and a business analysis work plan. This model will be made available to you after once the webinar video is posted. Okay. Here. The first thing is the useful skills that helps in BA planning. In my experience, these 3 skills have given me a great deal of competitive advantage in improving my skills. The first one is architectural thinking. So what is architectural thinking? Basically, when you are dealing with digital transformation projects, you're dealing with lots of complicated or complex systems that are interconnected. It could be systems, services, etc. Even though you'll be targeting on one particular service or one particular process at a time to change, or it could be a big huge transformation project, you need to have this holistic approach. You need to consider, okay, if I make one change, what are all the other parts that are going to affect it, which may be out of the context that we are talking talking to change as well. It could be a market dynamics, or it could be some kind of environmental dynamics. What is the impact that the change is going to create, how positive it is, how negative it is, etc. And finally, the align solutions to business strategy and goals. So this is very important. You need to have an idea of what the vision and mission of the organization is, what are the strategic moves the organization is making to achieve those goals, and then align the solution recommendations and the change process according to the business strategy and the goals. Okay, to the business strategy and goals. So the second skill is visual modeling. I personally think this is a great skill for a business analyst to possess, because a diagram, a picture is worth more than a sheet of million rows of data in an Excel sheet, or it could be lots and lots of documents. Just one simple diagram will convey the requirement specification. The visual modeling part is very important, and that's where I feel Enterprise Architect is a great tool that gives you the ability to not just visually model, but connect it to the strategic elements or artifacts, the architectural artifacts of the entire enterprise repository. Finally, the understanding of project management, especially for business analysis planning phase. The reason is just like any other any other task you do, you need to have for the business analysis activities as well, we need to have some resources. We need to gain time or buy time from stakeholders. We need to arrange for meetings, workshops, etc. And then it helps in stakeholder engagement activity as well. So to have an understanding of how project management works in the organization where you're going to where you're working for is an important part. And to have a good everyday engagement with the project manager helps with that as well. So moving on to the next topic, the business analysis score concept model. I'm not going to give you a training session on what the score concept model is, but I would like to highlight the fact that this is one simple picture which conveys succinctly the different dimensions of of the business analysis activities that an analyst will be engaged with. So for every business analysis activity, the thought should be aligned with these dimensions. Okay, if this activity has to be performed, how is it going to satisfy the need of the stakeholder? So what is the value I'm providing with this particular with this particular activity? What is the solution providing? Is it how good it is? And the change itself, when there's a change, it could be a positive change when the change is intentional, like driving a digital transformation project. But if there are changes due to environmental or social factors, like this pandemic, that means the value is lowered. So what happens during this when change happens? How well the organization will adapt to it? These kind of things has to be considered. And finally, the context part. Everything that every business analysis activity has to be relevant within a particular context, right? So a change can provide a benefit within a particular context. If it goes outside of the context, it may not be of any use at all, or it might just be gearing a negative effect, like getting all the scope creeping and unwanted and undesired, or sometimes we even say these are perceived, just concentrating on perceived needs of stakeholders rather than the real needs. So it is very important to understand the context. And now the next thing that we'll be discussing is the business planning and monitoring activities, the core topic. So what is planning and monitoring activities? What does a BA do? So there's a problem, a business problem, and the analyst is going to look at all the available sources of information through which the analyst will do a particular set of analysis tasks and then deliver set of value to the organization. So what are the input for analysis tasks? Sometimes there may be a few different artifacts that will be used multiple times for analysis, like a legal compliance document, or the entire information architecture which needs to be referred multiple times, etc. And there will be some set of analysis tasks which is listed later on, and then the output of the analysis task. There will be lots of output, like the scope. The business analyst would define a scope. What is the approach that needs to be followed through the business analysis activities? What are the tasks? What are the what are the different say, for example, interface analysis models, etc. But in one word, we can define this deliverable, that the output of analysis planning and monitoring task, as business analysis work plan. The old saying fits true here as well. So if you are failing to plan, that means you're planning to fail. So especially for a business analysis project, it is very important to have a business analysis work plan. There's always resistance to change, and there'll always be issues with conflicts between stakeholder needs, or you cannot get a buy-in from a sponsor or a stakeholder, or you cannot get the time for a particular from a stakeholder, etc. So these kind of people dynamic issues can be solved by having a clear, well articulated business analysis work plan, which also articulates the dependencies, constraints, and assumptions, and a clear structure of the governance plan in a document which will be signed off by all the sponsors and the key stakeholders. By having this document, the people involved in the project will have a clear understanding of what is expected out of them, and what they can expect out of a business analyst as well. So the business analyst task will also not go out of scope or out of context. So it helps to define that boundary, or we can say define the scope for this work, for the project. The diagram you see here is modeled purely in Enterprise Architect. So while I open the model in EA, if you have any questions, please do send it through. Scott, are there any questions?
There's no questions at the moment, but I am interested to see how all the different elements in the BA work plan get implemented in Enterprise Architect. So looking forward to seeing that.
Lovely. So here is the business analysis core concept model. As you can see, all the elements here: change, need, solution, stakeholder, context, value, etc. These are all elements. You can see the project browser on the left side of the of your screen. This is modeled in EA, and you can see the relationship between each of these elements. Okay, value can be increased or decreased by a change. A value can be quantified by a need can be quantified by the amount of value provided, and a solution can satisfy a need, and solution will deliver some value, etc. It's very self-explanatory, so I'm not going to explain each and everything in detail. Let's move on to the next aspect, example deliverables. So this is a mind map diagram. A mind map diagram itself can be used for analysis activities, for brainstorming session and to just map the different bits of, contextual items that you want to analyze in the initial phase of analysis. So here I've used this mind map plan to just touch upon the topics that we are going to talk about in the inbuilt features that EA provides for BA planning. Let's start with the organization model. A business analyst should, the first thing a business analyst should do while performing an analysis activity is to understand the organization structure. What is the command and control like in the team, in the in the entire project environment, and so this helps with the people dynamics to manage the stakeholders, to communicate the requirements efficiently with the people around you, with the relevant people. So this is a sample organization chart. I will click on the on this arrow to get the toolbox, and then I'll pin it here. You can see this diagram has been created in Enterprise Architect using these patterns. What I did was I just dragged and dropped this organization chart. So this is a pattern, pre-built pattern. Just drag and drop and click OK, and you can see this diagram created with all these elements. For example, if I want to change this level 1.0, I double click on this. To say I want to make this as CEO, I just make this as CEO. Not only this, you can visually change the appearance as well, visual appearance as well. For example, say I want to change this to select an image asset. Okay, I will go in with the alternate image where, say for example, I don't have CEO. Let me choose CFO just for the sake of demonstration, and say OK, and you can say OK, this image comes up. Okay, so this is an example. So you can clearly change this to different images, or you can even have image assets of the actual photographs of the people, of the stakeholders, and have this in here in the repository. Okay, moving back. Once we have an understanding of the organization structure, the next step is to get list of stakeholders, so which is called as a stakeholder register. There are also other models that will help you in the analysis activities. Let's first look at the stakeholder list. You double click on the stakeholder list. This takes us to a diagram which is now displaying as a specification manager view. So when I say specification manager view, there's a list of stakeholders and the nodes, and you can see what the stereotype is, etc., and different priorities. If you want to add new elements here, you can just click on add new. Okay, this gives you a list of stakeholder, which is basically a stakeholder register. And then I'll click on this one here. Let's see what happens. Okay, this is the stakeholder matrix view, which is basically an influence map, stakeholder influence map, I would say. This map shows the influence level and the impact level of each stakeholder for the project. So you can see stakeholder A and C are, it looks a bit different to D, B, and E. You know why? That's because I just made it to remind myself to explain this to you again about the appearance here. You can change the appearance of the stakeholder. Say enable custom drawing, you'll just get a different kind of a view. Go back and set as you can select an image asset to select the actual image of a person, a photograph of a person, or an alternate image, say something like this. Okay. Let's go back. So once the stakeholder register and the influence map is modeled, the next thing to do is to understand the scope. Okay. So by this stage, you'd have the initial conversations or initial interviews with the sponsors on what is the business need, what are you trying to achieve, and all those information. So it's time to do the scope, define the scope of the project. Let's see, there are two ways to define the scope in or represent scope in EA. One is using a boundary element, the other one using a hierarchy. So I double click on this. See here, the boundary element is this box here. Okay. This is a artifact, common artifact here, so which will display the boundary, the element that has that is highlighted where the pointer is. That's what the boundary element is. So you can drag and drop this onto the diagram and create a boundary, and then add all the information or all the modeling artifacts. It could be a feature, it could be a process, it could be just an activity or a requirement into this boundary to define the scope. Okay, it depends on what you're trying to model. So in this example, we have feature A, B, and C. These are the features in scope, whereas feature D and E has gone out of the scope. That means which is not going to be implemented for this phase of the project. Finally, okay. This is scope using a hierarchy. This is another method of defining a scope. You can see feature 2, 3, and 4 are nested into feature 1, and feature 4 is nested in feature 3, which is again nested in feature 1. So this is another way. Let's see what it actually means in the project browser. So what you can do is to find this in the project browser, right click on the element and then say find in project browser, or you could use the shortcut Alt+G. Okay, click. Now you see in the project browser the element is highlighted. So the project browser is this window that's on the left side of your screen. You can clearly see feature 1 here, which holds feature 2 and 3, and feature 4 is held by feature 3. So this is another way of defining scope or modeling scope in Enterprise Architect. So when feature 1 is in scope, that means you obviously have to implement feature 2, 3, and 4 as well. Okay. That is scope modeling. Then we'll move on to the functional decomposition diagram. So what is functional decomposition? You have a large piece of work, a large chunk of model which needs to be split into atomic parts. Depends on the level of detail you're trying to achieve. By doing this functional decomposition, you can clearly identify the amount of effort that are required and the resources that are required. So it is important to do functional decomposition at the initial planning phase to understand what is the scale of change that you're trying to achieve. Sometimes it might look like a simple change, but when you start digging into the complexity of the process and the amount of data that is required, you will see the scale of the change becomes huge. So it's always advisable to go to the atomic level as possible. And then next is the RACI matrix. I'll click on this. So here you can see this role 1, role 2, role 3. They are linked to set of activities 1, 2, and 3. So this role 1 is linked to role activity 1 as responsible. That means this particular role, whoever is having this role, for example, say this is the process owner, he's responsible for this particular activity. So that's how it is. So this diagram here, what you see is modeled as a diagram. There is another way to look at this. You can just click on switch view and then say I want to view this as a matrix. This is a RACI matrix, so I will click like this. See, you get a RACI matrix, and then I select this option, limit to connected elements, and you can have a clean RACI matrix where each element is linked with one of the associations like responsible, consulted, informed, or accountable. Okay. Okay, next I will move on to business glossary. A business glossary is quite an important part of the planning phase as well, because as a business analyst, you would want to make sure a term, when you say a word or a term, it is understood by all kinds of stakeholders or all groups of stakeholders without any ambiguity, right? So it is important to have a business glossary. So for example, what you see here is a glossary of acronyms which is built in Enterprise Architect. So here in EA means Enterprise Architect, which is different from Enterprise Architecture, which is a practice. Okay. Similarly, MDG here means model driven generation and nothing else. So by having this glossary, you are making sure that people are understanding it clearly without any ambiguity. And next I will open this Babok glossary. So this is again a pre-built one, comes with EA, where you have Babok perspective activated. So you can see activity diagram, actor, etc. So anyone in the audience is looking for or is going to sit for the CBAP exam, this could be a good feature for you to practice the definitions of the terminologies used in Babok. So I will also demonstrate how it is used. For example, change. Say this is an element, and we have say the change is an activity of transformation, blah blah blah, and then see activity, which you can actually see in the glossary here. Activity, a unit of work performed as a part of initiative or a process. And I click on this, so it says any effort undertaken with defined goal or objective, which is the this is the notes part, and that's the definition part. Okay, that's the initiative. Okay.
So Nithya, just to follow up on that, basically whenever you enter a predefined word in the glossary in your notes or in any of your documentation with Enterprise Architect, it's automatically underlined, and that's context sensitive. So the minute you start typing it, it gets underlined. So what this allows you to do is to have everybody in your team always understand what scientific or business or cultural terms mean with respect to your organization, and everybody's on the same page, which helps. We had a question just asking about what happens if you have a team that's based in different countries. Could you perhaps mention what are some of the benefits of using a glossary, especially if you've got a multilingual team working with Enterprise Architect?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So the glossary in EA supports language translation. So it uses Google Translator to translate the terminologies to different languages. So if the team is geographically dispersed and people are using different languages, again the meaning is translated, and EA ensures people understand the term in a very unambiguous way. Does that answer the question, Scott? Would you like to add any further comments on that?
The only thing I'd like to add is that we actually use it here at Sparx Systems for a help file. So we have it in Chinese and in French and in German and Japanese. So it automatically gets translated. And in addition to that, we also have predefined words that are related to the product, such as Ultimate Edition and Babop and UML and things that are relevant, that are keywords, so that they are always defined and highlighted, and people can click on that underlined element and get an instant definition. So thank you very much. That's great.
Fantastic. Let's proceed. The next thing I would like to talk about is the interface analysis. So this is very important part of analysis activities, because now you have now you know the organization structure, what the command and control structure is like, whether it's like a tight command and control, or it's like a very informal way of communication happening between the stakeholders. What are the what is the influence and impact of each stakeholder groups, and what's the scope the analysis activities is. You have decomposed the functional part, and then you have the RACI metrics. So you have all these things, and you have established a common vocabulary. So the foundation is there. And next, what you're doing is moving on to the interface analysis, how the existing applications or services components communicate with each other. What's the relationship between all of these components you're actually working towards transforming. So there are three different diagrams. The example that I'm providing here is just a subset of the features that is available in Enterprise Architect. I believe this is very critical and essential, and the basic thing that an analyst would have to look at. So this application interface diagram are basically UML diagrams. So you can see the sequence diagram, deployment diagram, component diagram, and interaction diagram. Let's delve into sequence diagram and see. This is a sample sequence diagram. You can see component 1 communicating with component 2. The service 1 is called, and then service 2 is called, and then service 3 is called. But there's no reverse direct communication happening from component 2 to component 1 in this particular example. And you can see that there's interface 2 and interface 1. So this is one. This shows a sequential order of communication. So hence the name sequence diagram. And the next one that we are going to see is the deployment diagram. I'll double click on this. Here you can see the actual infrastructure elements that are communicating with each other. So there's Node A and there's an execution environment, and you can see a communication path A between these two entities, right? And then there's an artifact A and artifact B that has a relationship. So obviously the communication between these two elements impacts the artifacts and its states. Okay. So this is the deployment diagram. So this is another kind of interface analysis you will do, which will show the interface between the deployment elements. Next, I go to the component part. So there'll be multiple applications, and each application will have so many components. Let's just assume component A is communicating with component B. There's a transfer of a particular object, a JSON object. It could be a file, or it could be, you know, a bulk of file, etc. It could be a bulk transaction. So this is port A and port A in these two components that are interacting with each other. So this is the interface analysis between components at the application level. So next would be the interaction diagram. So this interaction diagram you see is you can see the toolbox, basically an activity diagram, and these interaction parts, and these are interaction components, are group of, you know, I should say communication between objects at the object level, data level, that's happening here. Message 1 is a, you know, function is being called here, and there's a return of some value or just, you know, a result. This is interaction 2, and there'll be interaction 1. So obviously you can see the flow of the interactions. So interaction 1 happens, and then the interaction 2 happens, and then interaction 1 is positive, then interaction 3 happens, otherwise the activity ends. So this is another kind of analysis. So all the diagrams that we just saw is based on UML modeling language. So it's good for a business analyst to know about UML. If people want to know more about UML, in Sparx Systems website, there's also a tutorial for UML, which gives you a basic idea of what UML is, and what are the different types of UML diagrams, and how you can model them in Enterprise Architect. Next, we'll go into the user interface diagrams. Okay, so I've chosen just a simple, 3-page diagram. Let's say the page 1, page 2, page 3 are simple forms, or it could be web pages. This information flow, or the control flow shows like, okay, there's this form and there are these fields, and someone clicks next, it goes to page 2, and then form B opens, and then click next, form C opens, etc. If the back button is pressed, just goes back to the previous page. And if cancel is pressed, just the cleanup action is triggered, and then the the pages gets closed. It's fairly simple. There are also different kinds of interface diagrams that you can create in Enterprise Architect, like wireframe diagrams for Apple devices, for Android devices, etc., and a lot more. Going back. So we'll look at other types of analysis diagrams which are more popular these days. Let's see the custom diagrams. This is quite a simple diagram that you can show to a business user. Okay, so there's business process A, and there are like 2 information items which will be supplied to this process, or it will be the input, and then there's a resource item there, and this is the goal, and this is what is the output. When will the process be triggered is when the event A occurs, and who triggers it is actually. It's quite a simple picture that conveys the interaction between the different elements, the actors, the event, the process, etc. Everything together. It's a simple analysis diagram. So but call it as a custom diagram. Next thing that I'm going to talk about is the support for Amazon Web Services Architecture Diagram in EA. So this support is available from EA 15.2. Am I right, Scott?
With EA 15, we introduced AWS and Google, and we introduced some of the Azure icons in 15.2. So it allows you to basically model and design your cloud-based infrastructure, regardless of which technology you use, whether you use AWS, Azure, or the Google icons. So yeah, it's really great to be able to model it all in Enterprise Architect and then connect each of these elements to all of the other business analysis documents that you have within Enterprise Architect.
Absolutely fantastic. In the morning session, we had quite few questions regarding this. For example, say, how do you get all these icons, etc. So quickly, I'll just go and say, for example, I will just select this model wizard, and in model wizard you can see, okay, Google Web Images. So this is how I created them. It was quite simple. Just click on it and create pattern. The diagram appears into your the elements appear into your selected diagram or under the selected package. Right, so analysis, let's say I want to do the AWS Web Services. This is example 1, example 2, 3. This is the one that I've created, connected vehicle solution, and example 4. And in order to get all these icons, the important thing is you need to import these patterns here, release 1 and release 5, see here, these icons, and then just create pattern. And once these icons are all imported into the model, we can create the effective AWS architecture diagram just like this, or the GCP diagram. So here's a sample GCP diagram. This is the Google Cloud Platform and some icons there. And again, different components are interacting with each other, and then you can see the interfaces and the communication happening between them. So there's another one, a simple web model. So this is some basic diagram which says, oh, there's web page A, and this communicates with server 1 through the servlet A, and there's a JSP page, etc. So it's quite simple and self-descriptive. So these are the different kinds of diagrams. You can see the UML diagrams, you can see the user interface diagrams, and different types of analysis diagrams that EA provides out of the box for you to do interface analysis modeling. And let's move on to the other aspects. One is the document artifacts with built-in templates. It's a great one. I'll click on this and just created this one. I will create another one for the session. Let's just go here, go to the toolbox, and then I select the artifact. This artifacts and in common relationship. This will be available in all toolbox available in EA. It could be any diagram, but you'll still be able to see all these common elements. So select a document and then on here that there's a linked document, double click on it, and then you'll be able to choose the templates. So since we are talking about business analysis planning, EA comes with BABOK, support for BABOK, which is business analysis body of knowledge. So you can select different pre-built templates. For example, let's say business analysis approach, and click OK. So here it is. You can insert your company logo and adapt it to the to the company's font, etc. As you can see in the toolbar, it shows the document editing options, including spell check, etc. Okay, so that's the document artifacts. Next, document generation. So obviously we need to generate a lot of documents. After doing all these models, we still don't want to go into Word or Excel and type in all the details. Just want to click a button and I want to create a report. How would I do that? So there's this publish menu here. Inside this publish, you can see report builders. So there's an option. You click on the report builder and then the generate documentation wizard appears. You can select the template for which you want to create a document. You can open the template and modify. Okay, it's fully customizable. I'm just giving you an idea here, or you can create your own custom document. Create a new document template from the scratch to suit your needs. Another thing is you can create a HTML report as well, which can be then embedded into your website or can be published to Joomla, etc. Okay. Finally, we'll go to the Gantt chart. As I said, project management knowledge is also essential so that the business analysis activities can be planned for resources and for schedule and project schedule. So this is a sample diagram, which is an information technology roadmap diagram. There are several different diagrams that you will be able to create in EA. For example, I'll just quickly show you the different kinds of diagrams we have. That could be a strategy roadmap, business roadmap, it could be capability roadmap. You can see the different lanes here, definition, direction, etc. A product roadmap, technology roadmap, etc. So all you do is select this and then create the pattern, and the pattern gets loaded into the project browser, which you'll be able to customize it for your own needs. Okay, so with this, the built-in modeling capabilities of EA for business analysis planning, I've covered the main topics. As I said, EA has a rich set of features, and I've touched upon the topics that I have personally used for business analysis planning phase and which are quite useful. You may want to use more in-depth modeling tools like MATLAB or use Math library, etc. Okay, so these are the built-in. Let's move on to the example. Finally, so as I said, the business analysis work plan is the main deliverable of business analysis planning phase. So what does a work plan has? It has the inputs, goals, objectives. As we discussed earlier, these are the different components. You see goals and objectives. You see the project browser on the left side of your screen. Open this. Yep. So these are the different aspects of BA work plan. There could be more, but the important ones that are really required for BA work plan is ones that I've listed here. let's dig into the goals and objectives. So I chose to model this as a diagram. You could just have it as a document as well. You don't need to have a diagram, but I chose to do this because I'll be able to create relationship between goals, objectives, and benefits, etc., or risks, even risks, and other, issues and all those things which will affect customer experience. So here the main goal is customer experience. Before moving on, I'll just like to say that I'm using the same process which we discussed in the previous webinar of the series, claims audit process for a health insurance provider. That's the example that we chose to discuss in the webinar. I'm using the same use case here. So you can see the objectives are automate claims audit process, which will reduce manual errors in the reconciliation of claims, payment, etc. So I'm not going to read these benefits and objectives. As you can see, they're all modeled. If you want, you can create a relationship or traceability between them. That is, again, quite useful because we are in a planning phase. Just listed it here as we go through the series. Further down, there'll be more coming up in this topic. We can see how it can all be linked together. Next is the project overview. In the project overview, we have the assumptions. Okay, so the assumptions here, there are a couple of assumptions, example assumptions for you to see. As you can see, the scope and system, they're all underlined. That means the glossary definition will come up here. Okay, if you control click the full, you can read the full definition. So when I mean system, what it means in the organization for this project will be the same for all stakeholder groups. Okay, then we have the constraints. So the new system will only provide for user interface in English. The system can only reconcile receipts that will be in the process of reconciliation upon implementation. Oh, there is a spelling mistake there. So what I can do is we have the autocorrect option in EA. So okay, just click here and then you can, okay, this is another aspect which I was not expecting to show, but here it is. You can even search this particular element in Google or in EA user guide or in Wikipedia, etc. You're not missing anything. You're not missing anything by modeling this in Enterprise Architect. I know a lot of business analysts of so much got used to Excel and Microsoft Word, they will be missing all these features, but really you have all the spell checks and etc. here. See, you have the implementation, I changed it. Same goes with all the spelling errors and grammatical errors. Then you have add new. If you want to add more constraints, you can just click on add new and keep adding. And then we'll move on to dependencies. So why do we have assumptions, constraints, and dependencies? It's very important to state all these things in the business analysis work plan. So, it's because you need to state all these things clearly so that the project plan, it is embedded into the project plan. It is integrated with this will be integrated into the project plan. So in order for the project to go as per the schedule and within the budget, all these constraints are relevant. So the stakeholders must be made aware of your constraints and dependencies so that in case they want to negotiate on few things, it can all happen at the early stage during the planning phase rather than while during the implementation phase where there'll be more change requests coming for the requirements, which will be often a tedious process. Okay, here you go, the same thing. Walk through, I'll just say okay. Then we'll move on to the functional decomposition part, just as we saw in the example. So the example: claims process, claims audit process, and payment processing. These are the three major chunks of process we are looking to automate, and they are interrelated and they are decomposed into smaller components inside them. So by having an idea of like these are the different processes that we are going to look at, and we can see we can estimate the effort and complexity of each of this individual atomic tasks, thereby will give you a clear idea of how long or how much of a resource you need, what's the budget, etc., to have more accurate estimation for your project. Next we'll go into the BA approach. So BA approach here, I chose to use the existing model template, document template that I showed earlier. So double click on it, you can see the document that is here. I use this template, and obviously we need a lot of documentation when I'm doing business analysis activities, and here is the documentation. So using EA makes it much easier. You only do the bits that are really required to be typed. Otherwise, you have all this diagrams modeled, which will be connected or like easily traceable to the requirements. The goals will be traceable to the requirements, etc., which you don't have to type it in an Excel sheet, etc. It's all there. So all you will do is right click and then click generate report, you will get it. But these are simple things where you need to type in. For example, in the analysis approach, you have what is the kind of approach for this example. So each phase of the project development will be performed in the sequential order. That is like there are major chunks of processes. They are there's high dependencies between them. So the plan-based approach is essential there. But when we go into the individual process development, the development team can follow an agile delivery method. Okay, so this is a mixed approach here. What are the roles and responsibilities of a BA? This is a very important thing to set the expectations to the stakeholders of what you'll be providing and what is inside the scope of a BA. I can see there are like 12 items in here, and then business analysis techniques to be used. What are the techniques you're proposing to use? So for this example, said techniques like interviews, focus groups, workshops, and structured walkthroughs will be used to collect requirements to identify the real needs. Okay, you need the help of assistance of IT staff to provide prototypes and screen mock-ups for discussions and in workshops. Like for example, if you want to conduct a design thinking workshop, you will need some more hands with prototyping. Finally, what are the models you'll be providing, like context diagrams, use case, process flow, etc., different kind of requirements modeling that are required for this project. So these are the techniques to be used. This is an example here. Okay, I'll close this. The deliverables, yes. So once you have this approach, so what exactly are you going to deliver? State it. You don't have to leave it, I'll provide the documents. No, you need to give them give a set of documents or set of deliverables that you'll be providing out of the business analysis activities. For example, here is it: business requirements document, functional requirements specification document, gap matrices, etc. So what you see here is a high level of deliverable. This can be more specific, like BRE for process 1, a functional requirement specification for process 2, and an FR for process 3, etc. And gap matrix, which identifying gaps between these two applications. More specific, that is more helpful, right? And user acceptance criteria document: how is the solution, when will the solution be accepted, what is the acceptance criteria, etc. In further webinars, we'll see how exactly the user acceptance criteria can be modeled. Because this is planning phase, let's just stick to planning. Finally, the work breakdown structure, the break part. So we have the plan, design, facilitate, and closure. These are the different phases in the business analysis activities for a project. So in plan, we have all these. I'm not going to read through each and every activity. You can see the work breakdown structure here in the project browser. For example, conduct requirements elicitation, has conduct interviews, conduct surveys, workshops, which are further, okay, you can just say how many interviews you want, with whom do you want, surveys, and different kinds of document analysis, how many structured walkthroughs, etc. So everything has to be planned in detail. So the idea here is to plan for the resource allocation. Okay. For example, I have selected this domain expert interview. You can see you need the domain expert, who's basically a process owner. This resource can actually be a name if it's in a team-based repository. I've just chosen it to be just an abstract name, so which is domain expert. Then a lead analyst, which the role is a business analyst, and the number of hours and the effort in terms of number of hours spent required, expected to be spent on each of these activities. So thereby, when you have this resource plan and you provide this to the project manager and the delivery manager, for example, they can all three of the business analyst and the entire team can sit together and see, like, okay, we need to arrange the logistics for these business analysis activities. If we have to conduct workshop, we need all these resources. We need we need to schedule a time, a place, etc. So it makes it easy to organize the logistics for the BA activities and also to plan the schedule of the project. Okay, what you see here is the resource plan. When this is provided to the project manager, you can go into creating a work plan. For example, a project schedule. For example, I click on WBS, which is the work breakdown structure. I go into the construct menu, which is for the project management, and say Gantt chart. This will give you, okay, these are the different tasks for these different roles, and then we can set the start and end date, and as they complete, the percentage of completion will also be set. So once you plan, it's all there. You don't have to do multiple times the resource planning and the project schedule planning, etc. It's once you do it, it makes the job of the project manager simple. Sorry about that. Finally, so you can see all these steps. Yes, I didn't touch upon the stakeholder part yet. So here we have the stakeholder list. What you see here is a stakeholder map and the relationship between these two stakeholders, or the influence, they are affecting the attributes that are going to affect. For example, say the development and implementation manager and the HR manager has worked together in a previous organization, so the relationship is good, there won't be much conflicts, etc. This kind of analysis is helpful. Next is the influence map, which here I modeled it as a RACI matrix. Let's say all, and then I will select the overlay for RACI matrix. So this is a clean, crisp RACI matrix, which gives the responsible person for the process assess policy benefits is CFO, accountable person for claims audit are like 3 people who are accountable for it, etc. So this is the RACI matrix, which is modeled using the relationship matrix view of EA. Have the potential stakeholder analysis, which is basically the diagram which we saw earlier. I will just open that influence stakeholder list. Here I've used the images to make it more, businessy, and here it's more kind of just boxes and lines. And this one shows the relationship between the logical components and the, which person is responsible for a component, or the relationship between a stakeholder group or a stakeholder with an application component, in order to understand the real need for the stakeholder and how the component should be changed or developed. So some of the attributes, it's good to model the attributes that might affect your end goal as well. Then finally, let's go to the governance plan. So we have all the components for the business analysis planning. It's important to define the governance plan as well and the stakeholder engagement approach. So what you see here is a governance hierarchy in an organization where the BA practice is set up and it's mature, there'll be a governance council. So that will be a group of people like strategy manager from the IT team, the finance officer, the chief finance officer, legal advisor for the organization. There could also be a security analyst, etc. And the enterprise architect. So this will be this is the sample governance council, and then there's the higher up is for that particular project. So this governance council will be linked to different projects that are happening in the organization. For example, here's a program release manager, and the hierarchy goes like this. So a business analyst has to get approval from the lead analyst, and then who have to get consensus from the peer groups, and then also get the approval from the program release manager. So you can word them in a document, and you can also model them as a diagram. I'll just open the sample governance model. You can say this. So the project is named as Blue Claims. There's no reason why I chose name, just chose name that way. Here's an example, and here's the document information, distribution list, etc. The normal information that will be there in any document, the version history, etc. And then the purpose of the document and how the governance process. You can even the way that I've explained, you can make this as process model. Say submit for approval, the person has to be approved in so many, like within this much days, etc. You can use a process model diagram as well. I chose to use the organization structure, and then if there are any stakeholder concerns and views, it helps to model them as well. This is more of a business analysis activity of liaising between the stakeholders, so I've just left that there. So if you're really in a workshop or conducting interviews, you can fill in the details. And then here's the RACI metrics for the sample example process that we have chosen. And here is the governance checkpoints, and the which are very important, because a performance criteria, how is the business analysis activity performance measured? It's usually a lot of it goes stage by stage. You do a particular interview that works well, then that's fine. Otherwise, you go for a different approach. You change the approach to adapt to the situation, because usually in a huge digital transformation endeavor, the situation is so dynamic. People come in and out of the projects, the market conditions change, and a lot of things happen. So there should be a lot of checkpoints to see whether the approach is working, or the activity that you have worked is fit for purpose, etc. So you need to have checkpoints like weekly review of the RAID log, which we touched upon, in the last webinar series, a typical day in a business analysis, business analyst, how to maintain RAID log in EA, a weekly review of the progress, and what are the elicitation events, how the requirements are verified, etc. So it's important to document these checkpoints as well, and to adhere to the checkpoints for approval. And define the success or failure criteria. This will help you have a control over your business analysis deliverable, like whether you have delivered what they have asked for, or they would have asked for a particular document and everything was like all green a week before, and suddenly one of the stakeholder comes and says like, this is not what I asked for. So it's always good to know exactly what's being expected. So it's important to have the success or failure criteria defined. Then the acceptance procedure. So this is the procedure, approval procedure that a business analyst will, will have to follow for any kind of approval. So again, this can be modeled as a diagram. Here is the stakeholder register with a signing of authority and a time for review. That's sometimes you might even have to add a column for special needs. If a person is not able to come, to a workshop, how would you, but still the stakeholder is important, how would you deal with such situation? Or if a person is not available, how will you deal with that situation? So it's important to think of all these kind of aspects and then create the business analysis governance plan. So with this, you have all the components that are required for business analysis planning deliverables. So see, the main aspects are here. So if you want to document, just go ahead, use EA's pre-built feature to publish it in HTML, or create your own document template, or use an existing document template and generate a document. So I hope this has been of some help, some knowledge to you all. I can go on to the conclusion. Are there any questions, Scott?
Nithya, there's one question just asking about how can the dependencies of a particular task be shown? So how can you look at things like traceability and dependencies within Enterprise Architect?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. EA has a lot of different ways to see the traceability and the relationship between the architectural artifacts that are there in the repository, be it just a document, a goal, a requirement to a model, etc. There's this traceability matrix, and there's the relationship matrix, a traceability view, a hierarchy view, which shows the hierarchy of the relationship. Then there's this relationship window, which you can just stick it to dock it to one of the corners of the screen, and always select on a particular select any artifact, and then the relationship, all the related elements will be shown. The other important thing, that's just as I said in today's morning session, I did mention that, is one beautiful feature in EA, just drag and drop an element onto a clean neat diagram, right click on the element and then say show all the related elements, and all the related elements pops up with the connectors that shows the type of relationship it has. So this is a beautiful feature that makes the gap analysis task very easy and very simple. Not just gap analysis, impact analysis, I should say. So you will be able to say, okay, if I change this particular component, say I want to move a print button in a web page from top corner to the bottom right corner, what is the impact? Is that could have been a special need for the requirement that wants that a user wanted to have that button in a particular place in the form. So after 5 years time, still you have that information available by just doing a simple impact analysis in it. So it's that beautiful it is. Like I always say, this is a wow factor for me. I like that very much. I've used it many times. So with this, I will. Are there any more questions, Scott? Are we good to wrap up? Or?
So there's a question from Andy saying, as well as the video being published to the website, so will the model be made available for download? So the video will be made available on sparxsystems.com/webinars, and it will also be made available on the Sparx Systems YouTube site. So if you do a search for Sparx Systems YouTube, it'll come up to our channel, and so that's great. What about the model that you've shown today? Nithya?
Absolutely. I will send this model to you. I will share this model with you, Scott, which you should be able to upload it to the web page of
Certainly
this
can. So
webinar. Yeah,
Andy, in response to your question, yes, we can make it available, and the video will be made available probably within 24 hours on the YouTube site. So I'll let you wrap up, Nithya.
fantastic. Good to see the questions coming. Here's the conclusion. The usual problem of the systems don't talk to each other is because, there are siloed systems, siloed data, etc., which has integration problems. So when you have a holistic approach in solving the business problems, it's easier to you need to have the holistic approach. That's what I'm trying to say, to solve this kind of problem. You don't just look at one system or one process and say, how am I going to make it so high end process? No, it's about, like, it's not how high tech it is, it's about how usable it is, how easy it is, how compatible it is with the other systems in the organization. So for that, you need to have a holistic approach. By using Enterprise Architect, it's a complete enterprise architecture repository. If an organization chooses to model the enterprise architecture in EA, a lot of, you'll have all the components of the repository, like the goals, the benefits, the business motivation model, the the analysis models, the requirements, even the code engineering, user interface, etc. Everything is tied together using the relationships with relationship matrix and connectors, etc. So you can achieve end-to-end traceability in enterprise architect. So with Spark systems, what I personally see, like, all these features steers rapid business analysis because it has got rich built-in features. Okay, so the usual problem is, people say, like, by engaging a business analyst, like, we probably should just go with the product owner and start doing a rapid development approach, so we can just deliver minimum viable products soon. But then what happens if that product is not communicating properly with the other, or it's not compatible with the other part of the organization? Right, so it's always important, depending on the project and the scale of the transformation happening, whether to engage a business analyst or not. But whatever it is, by using a tool like EA, the best business analysis activities can also be steered, propelled in a rapid manner. So that way documentation is easier, delivery of communication of requirements is simpler, real-time collaboration is possible in EA. It's not like emailing a document and then waiting for it, and by that time you get a response, you have to change the document again. No, that's not going to happen here. You can have real-time communication when you're using Enterprise Architect, using its collaboration features. By saying this, I like to thank you all for being here to attend the webinar. Hope your time has been well spent, and that was quite an informative session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to hear from you. So as we mentioned, this webinar will appear on YouTube and sparksystems.com. I'd encourage everybody to download the latest version of Enterprise Architect 15.2 beta, which is out now. And if you have any suggestions for future webinars, please just send them through to webinar@sparksystems.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. And there'll be a number of new webinars being published on our website over the coming weeks. So thanks, Nithya, for the comprehensive introduction. And of course, some of those artifacts can also be made available by the ProCloud server, so people can consume them on their mobile phones and web pages. It's been a great presentation, lots of content, and I'm sure many of you will want to watch it several times over to get some of those details. Look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, everyone. Take care, look after one another, and it's great having so many people engaged and online tonight. So look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you all.